Windows Server 2022. Welcome back everybody. I'm Prakash Pradhan, your trainer for this entire series. In today's topic, as you can see, we are going to see for the first time the process of promoting your Windows Server 2022 as a domain controller. Of course, after that, we're going to see the client also joining in a domain controller and continue with the further process. Now, without wasting your precious time, so let's go to Server 2022 and start the process of promoting Server 2022 as a domain controller. Now, as I do believe that you all know or you're familiar with the prerequisite of promoting your Windows Server 2022, even your older version of operating system, that before you proceed with the process of installing or promoting your Server 2022 as a domain controller, the first prerequisite is that you need to have a static IP address. So I have already set my IP address over here, if you can see here over here. So let's see in detail the IP configuration of my server. This is my IP 192.168.200.200, and of course the DNS is also the same thing, 200.200. Now, so let's start with the process of promoting the server. And in order to process or just continue with the process of promoting your Windows Server 2022 as a domain controller, you will have to add a role. That is, from the manage, go to add roles and features, and of course it's not a feature, it's an add. So we are going to add a role. It's a role based feature. It's a role based installation, so that's why we are not going to talk about the feature. Now, this is the name of my domain. Okay, if you'd like to see over here the name of my server, I have given a name as a DC so that it will be easy, okay, later on to identify the name of our server as well. So it's a data center of Windows Server 2022 and the IP address is shown over here. Next, and as I said, we are not going to talk about the feature, it's your role. So we are going to install our Active Directory domain services for the first time to promote your Server 2022 as a domain controller. And when we select that Active Directory domain controller, this role actually over here, so it's going to add some of the other supported roles that is to be needed over here, or in a form of your tools. Okay, like you can see over here, Active Directory Administrative Center is here, 80 days snap-in. So these all are the, by default it's been selected whenever you select Active Directory domain services role over here. That means, okay, so it's a mandatory, so I'm going to add it. All these features has to be added. Okay, so now let's go. Next, we are not going to see any of this feature over here. Now after that, next, so these all are the things that are going to be installed actually. Okay, so let's install it. This is the first phase of simply adding a role of Active Directory domain services, and after the role is being installed, we'll have to continue with the further process of promoting the server as a domain controller. Of course, we're going to have the fully qualified domain name in our scenario. So let it install first, Active Directory domain services role. After it gets installed, then we'll come back and just continue with the further process of promoting this server as a domain controller. Okay, now as you can see, the Active Directory domain services role has been installed successfully. Now we are going to continue with the post deployment configuration in order to promote Server 2022 as a domain controller. So I'm going to click this option. And I do believe that you all know about the meaning of all of these three options that I have already explained in Windows Server 2019. So if you have missed out, so I suggest you to go through that. Now, since we are going to talk about installing a new forest, so I'm going to click add a new forest. Now let's give the name of our domain. So let's say, okay, vitech.com I'm going to give. This is the name of your domain. So it's going to take few seconds in order to make sure that this domain name is not used in our network environment. So if you see the forest function label and the domain function label over here, highest is Server 2016. So we're going to select the default one, and this is the directory service restore mode. And regarding this, I have made a separate video in Server 2019 how to reset this password if you happen to forget this one. So I'm going to give a same password that I have used for the server, that means the domain controller administrator password. So I'm going to give the same. So I also suggest you to give the same things, because see, this restore mode password we hardly use, so sometimes we do forget. Of course there is an option to reset this, but it will be wise enough to give the same password. So I'm going to give the password, and now it's going to see that a delegation for DNS server cannot be created because the authority parent zone cannot be found, because there is no. So I'm going to click next. Now it's going to give the first part of your domain, that's a Vitech, not .com, because the net bias name for the domain will be the first part of your domain name, excluding the dot. So as I told you, it's a Vitech now. Next, now it's going to talk about your, the folder that are going to be stored. Okay, sysbol, ntds, okay, all of this folder, your database, your log file, and the sysbol. Of course, it is a location where your group policy is going to be created and stored over there at the root of your C drive, and it's a log file for your it's stored in ntds, and this is your database. So if you'd like to see the location of all of this sysbol folder and your database along with the log file, it is up to you, but I do suggest you to let it remain in root of the C only if you have a failover planning. But if you have certain other issues, so I suggest you to move it somewhere else. So let's continue with the next. Now it's giving you review of what you have selected right now. Entire things are there. If you like to view the script, for this option, and you can export it as well. Okay, there's option, but we don't want to do at this moment, so I'm going to click next. Now it's going to give you the final option, that means the final information, or I mean to say the entire result, whatever option that you have selected in order to promote this server 2022 as a domain controller. And after this, we're going to click install. Okay, now prerequisite all are run. See, prerequisite check completed successfully without any error, so we're going to click it install. Now this process promotes your server 2022 as a fully qualified domain name. So it's going to take few seconds, or it might take few minutes, then we'll come back. Okay, welcome back. Now as you can see, your domain control has been successfully promoted into Windows Server 2022, and this is the first login. We are going to log in a Windows Server 2022 domain controller. So let's see how it looks, and most probably its objects, your DNS record, all are most probably it's the same. There is no change at this moment. In between, let's take one client to join into a domain controller as well at the same time. Okay, so let me set the IP address first of all. If I look after the IP, I guess it is a DHCP IP. Okay, it's a DHCP IP. I have to assign my own IP in order to be able to join this Windows 10 into a first domain controller of server 2022. So let's go to the NIC properties, and we're going to assign the IP in the range of your domain controller. Of course, that's in the range of 200. And we are using class C, classful IP. So let's assign the IP address in the range of domain controller 192.168.200. Let's say 2. Okay, so I'm going to use the DNS 200.200. It's a DNS IP address. So let's ping it once, whether we are able to reach to the domain controller or not. 192.168.200.200. It should be able to reply. Okay, congratulations, it's able to reply. Now let's ping it via domain name. Okay, so it's successfully done. Now we are going to join this into a domain controller for the first time in server 2022. Now see, the server manager is being loaded. So in between, we'll join this client into a domain controller. Okay, so let's go to join this computer as a member of the server 2022. So I'm going to write a domain over here. So the both work are done at the same time. We promote this server 2022 as a domain controller. At the same time, we join a client to a domain as well. So let's provide the credential of the server. Now it should ask to restart, and in between we are going to go to the domain controller and create an object so that that object can log in into this server 2022 for the first time. Okay, let's of course it's mandatory to restart, otherwise you won't be able to log in. Now let's go to the domain. Okay, now if I have a look over here in Active Directory users and computers, so there should be one computer and one client should have been shown over here. Okay, so it's loading. Let's go to the users and computers. Since it's a first login, it's going to take a bit longer time. It's almost done. Have patience. ICT loading actually it takes time for the first login. So let's wait for a few more seconds. in between, if you have a look to your client, it's restarted. Okay, now we'll come to the first Active Directory users and this computer's console for the first time in server 2022. Now since the one workstation has been joined as a member of this domain, so that computer should come over here in the computers. Okay, it should come over here. See, it's coming. Okay, now if I show you the properties of this computer, then we are going to notice it is the same computer that we joined. Okay, let's say the operating system, that's a Windows 10 Pro. Of course, that's a Windows 10 Pro that we joined from the client. So now next thing is that we are going to create one object so that that client will be able to log in. Okay, so we are going to create first, or you make a habit of creating one way all the time before you create any object. Okay, let's say test. Okay, so I'm going to write test and I'm going to create one object having a name. Let's give it Sam. Okay, the name, account name is Sam, and of course we're going to see, okay, we will remove that, user cannot see in the password. We'll take this one, user cannot see in the password, and we're going to give the most commonly used password, that's a complex one. Okay, so now object has been created and the workstation has been joined into the domain. So this is the domain controller, it's a DC1 and it's a client that's been a member of the server 2022. Now if I go to my client operating system, okay, it's loading, it's a Windows 10. Now it's going to connect it. So now let's log in for the first time as a domain credential in Windows 10. Of course, we are going to use other credential over here. So our user account was Sam and I'm going to give the password. So you see now it's going to log in successfully. So now the client has been joined into your Windows Server 2022 domain for the first time, and the client user or the object that we created is also successful to log in. Now it's saying the welcome, that means it's done. So I do believe this was easygoing. Okay, and I have shown the step-by-step process of promoting your server into a domain controller and also join any of the workstation, any of the client into your domain environment. So if you find it fruitful, please do like and subscribe. Thank you.